There you are.
Hi, guys. Welcome to In the Room with Communitas. I'm James, and with me we have Mike Kudar and Bethany LaBue. Bethany, am I pronouncing your last name?
You are. Beth
Right.
LaBue is perfect.
Okay, cool. I worried about that before we got started.
You did great.
Mike's not with us today. Mike is with us today. Leon is not with us today. He is loading a moving truck right now. But we're glad to have you guys. We are excited to be representing Communitas, just creating a portrait of what Communitas North America is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're excited to be having conversations about the church and mission in our present context. And we hope that these conversations are encouraging and inspiring and really promote creativity amongst Jesus followers.
Mm-hmm.
To get us started, Mike Kudar played a big role in the creating of this book, Dynamic Adventure, which is like an essential tool at Communitas. And Mike, I was hoping you could share with us.
Excuse me.
How did the book Dynamic Adventure come about?
I don't know. It just showed up miraculously one day.
Tablets.
Yes, exactly. No, it was kind of born out of a process that we were engaged with at Communitas. Communitas has been doing church planting for a really long time, and we had been doing some workshopping and some discussion. We have lots and lots of discussion groups and theologizing and theorizing in Communitas. We love to talk about stuff, tons. And we had been talking through what exactly is our approach to church planting. We've done a whole lot of workshopping about it, but we never really had, and this is, 7 years ago now, maybe something like that, where we started to think about doing this. And we never really had solid language around our actual church planting approach. So you'd ask somebody that's somewhere in Europe, so you're going to plant a church. So what are you doing? Well, we're going here. We're going to, we're first going to start hang out in the cafe, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Then we're going to do this other thing. But there wasn't a lot of clarity around the process, if you will, of what we were doing. So we wanted to put some solid language around all of that, all that collective experience, all the story, look for the common threads that we heard from everybody's church planting experiences, and also look at churches that were already existing, maybe that we knew of or that we were part of or planted even, and those that were sustainable and healthy and fruitful and multiplying. What were some of the characteristics that they had, and let's combine this stuff into what we're aspiring to and also doing, develop some language around that so that we could talk to ourselves about what we do and understand each other, train people, and then of course invite others into the conversation, like on a global level, with a like an accessible approach to missional church planting. The other reason that we wanted to write the book was that there wasn't at the time a lot of material available. There weren't a lot of tools and books available to groups of people that wanted to be missional faith communities, whatever that might look like. You certainly could call it a church, it could be a missional community, it could be all sorts of different kind of expressions, but there weren't a lot of practical resources around how do we do that together. And that's an entirely different thing than, let's say, being a person on mission, a single individual. It's like, hey, I feel called to do this thing. But when there's 10 or 12 people in the room trying to decide, what are our values? How do we want to live? What is our mission? That's a whole different, a whole different experience. And we just felt like we could contribute to helping people to really get through that and into that well.
Today we're going to be focusing on two of the dynamics presented in the book. Do you think you could just briefly describe what the dynamics are? And I've heard you talk a little bit about like how dynamic adventure should be utilized. Maybe just give us an idea of that as well.
Sure. So a dynamic is as I said, it's kind of an observed characteristic. That's kind of what we're saying. It's also kind of a behavior. It's kind of goes between noun and verb. But these are the core elements, if you will, of our missional church planting approach. There's 6 of the dynamics. And again, they're derived from observing and participating in planting, like, healthy, sustainable, multiplying, fruitful missional churches, which is a different thing than other kinds of churches that are out there. This whole idea of church built on a missional platform is just a different way of expressing things, and it has its a unique way of looking and doing things. So there's 6 dynamics. The first one is embed, and essentially that's just diving deep into your context and in order to understand it and to we'll talk about it a lot more, but understand your context, absorb a lot from context, to become part of the context, initiate as a result. Then how do you live as a disciple of Christ and a bearer of good news and shalom in that way after you learn about your context and begin to initiate something. There's practice. What are the spiritual rhythms of life as a community that we have together? Mature, what sort of leadership, what beyond kind of 10 people in a living room, if there's something more, how does this get led, and how do we aspire to a future? How do we live again, well together? And then hubbing and extending are about multiplication and just extending the reach of the super local expression to another place in our city or somewhere else in the world.
Awesome. Guess I would ask, maybe a 2-part question. Want to give you guys both a chance to maybe, if you feel a need to like expand on that definition of embedding, because it's one of the things we're going to be talking about a lot. And also, why is embedding so important to our process at Communitas? Why do we believe embedding is important to starting an initiative?
Sure. Bethany, you want to?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, Communitas has historically been a cross-cultural mission organization, and so you have people relocating to places that they aren't from, don't know, haven't lived. And so it's just some wisdom in being humble, being a learner, being curious, taking time, being patient, listening to the Spirit, finding translators, cultural translators, people of peace who are curious to you and can help you. So these are just wise things that missionaries can choose to do to find greater significance and influence and really discern from the Lord, what does mission look like where you've placed me here? And I would go so far as to say that's kind of maybe more natural for a cross-cultural worker to start there. But we would encourage the person who's from, Denver, Colorado, where I am, or someone who maybe grew up somewhere and is still there. We would say the same, like never stop learning about your neighborhood, never stop learning about the changes that are occurring, the shifts, the people moving in or moving out, the aging, the whatever, and so we would just encourage the national leader as well to get into those same habits of continually being curious, continually learning, continually looking and listening for the Lord. So because for the sake of kingdom growing and for the sake of impact and effectiveness and not missing what's right there because you have grown accustomed or.
Yeah.
What would you add, Mike?
I think it's great. I think your point about it feels more natural if it's a very cross-cultural experience to say, someone need to explain this to me, right? but I actually almost struggle sometimes with thinking missionarily about where I've lived my whole life. Like I take everything for granted, right? I feel like I know everything, but in that I miss so much. I miss most, frankly, because I have my own little suburban subculture, right? And there's all these other subcultures and things happening that I just overlook. So I would say yes to the curiosity for sure. And that whole sense of intentionality, like, whatever, whether it's cross-cultural, whether it's within one's culture, just having a sense of intentionality around it and expectancy almost as well of it's really remarkable sometimes when you are running an errand or something, and all of a sudden you kind of hear like the Lord say, hey, get ready for something. I'm not sure what it is, but then your radar's up, and all of a sudden, and then because you're kind of paying attention, you have the interaction that you might not otherwise have had. And yeah, I used to kind of go to Starbucks. I don't go very much anymore just because it gets too expensive. But like, okay, Lord, who am I going to talk to this time? Like, who's that person? And sometimes it was completely trivial, but other times it was not. And just that sense of intentionality, that sense of curiosity, that sense of expectancy, especially for those of us who are within our own cultures, I think is really important, for sure. For sure. And also embedding is not just we want to immerse ourselves in culture, whether it's our own or someone else's, so to speak, but we want it to be ours too, right? At some level, we want to be in that. We don't want to just parachute in and jump back out. We want to know about the community because we want to be with the community, right? And that's a whole bunch of it as well. I would say that we don't want to be, it's within reasonable limits, right? We don't want to be standing outside of the culture either. We want to be in it and have the pulse of all that. If our community has a need, we want to be in that and with that and bringing some help to that, not just showing up one day to do something good, right?
I am getting this picture of like this option of like, oh, I created something. You guys quit doing what you're doing and come.
Yeah,
to the thing that I created apart from you, versus this, like, for me, embedding is a lot of practice of belonging. We like step into a community, we become familiar with it, and then if we end up initiating something, we're initiating from within, like with relationships that already exist, and with the like inside voice of those relationships.
Yep, absolutely. And we, in the dynamic adventure, in the guide itself, in the embedding area, we talk about a missionary lifestyle, and it's described as a Celtic knot, and there's three points to the knot, so just three leaves or whatever. Absorbing, relating, and serving is kind of the 3 points of that. And the absorbing piece is immersion, listening, it's the curiosity, it's all that, it's all those things. Relating is deep connection and befriending, that whole becoming part of the community, being with people. And then the serving piece, how do we participate in the community and enrich the community with whatever we bring to that as well. And I think those are helpful, descriptions of the process, whether it's local or translocal.
Yeah, that's great.
Something you said earlier about the ownership piece, Mike, makes me wonder what are some good healthy methods for embedding? How have we seen that done well?
we should have a conversation here, the three of us, I believe, at least, or more. Um, that's such it, okay. There's got to be some simple answers to it, but I'm prone to say wanting to get more complicated. Um, how have we seen it done well? We've seen it done well based on the context that it's occurring in, right? I mean, every context is different. And therefore the way one embeds probably looks different. Um, but things like, frequenting the same places over and over and over, even though you'd really like to try this place and that place and that place, or just kind of being intentional about saying, okay, this coffee shop is the one I'm going to hang out in for the next month or two or five, and like, I'm going to get to know folks. I know James has an affinity for coffee shops and friends that show up every day. Or choose your beverage of choice, right? Those kind of social places. Things we've seen a lot of things spring out of initial embedding in serving situations, or situations that are helping folks that are experiencing homelessness or refugee status, or all sorts of things like that, where it's kind of an embedding piece in perhaps over several different cultural distances, where you're like, okay, I'm in this place in the UK that I just moved to, and I'm also going into a third or fourth culture with these folks that are immigrants who I don't understand their language, so you're really getting a huge immersion at deep depth. But many times that's very, very fruitful, those kinds of things. But it's about the intentionality, I would say, and the curiosity that we talked about before. But lots of, even in just a couple of examples I have in my head, they've borne wonderful fruit just by being intentional, by just going to the same coffee shop every day for your coffee and getting to know the folks, or again, serving situations. What are the needs of our community? What are the needs of the community within the community, kind of stuff. Bethany, I know you've got lots of things for sure to share.
Okay. Would it be helpful just to speak from first person?
Absolutely.
I was thinking, Bethany, it's really fun that we had you 2 weeks ago and have you presently, because you actually, I think, started to tease at this 2 weeks back. So it would be great to just hear from your experience.
So, okay, awesome. So in one of the places here in the United States that my husband and I lived for a short period of time, we were invited by someone we were in relationship with through a church connection. And he was really the only Christian in a community of artisans in the city. And he invited me to pray and to participate. And so it was just this person of peace, right, who had a vision, had a desire to see his friends see God more clearly, and meet God, come to some faith in him. And so sure enough, Steve and I found ourselves, this is pre-kids, and so we found ourselves late nights with poetry slams and fashion shows and hip hop dancing, and there was a sneaker artist, and I mean, on and on, bands, grunge bands, parties with just some really, really interesting people. And so I guess the embedding piece for us was finding someone with and developing a relationship with someone who then trusted us to join him in a mission that he was longing to. And then, of course, we embedded into that slowly but surely, making ourselves available to show up, take photos, be whatever. I modeled in a fashion show when I was 3 months pregnant. So I had this teeny little pouch for this one, fashion designer. And so it was wonderful. And, we were in it for about 2.5 years. And then both that gentleman got married and moved, and Steve and I had to move to our next destination. We didn't see anyone come to faith, but we definitely know that they experienced Jesus through that man and through me and Steve over and over and over and over. And we can trust that seed laying. Fast forward to Italy, we moved there, and some of our embedding practices were putting our now 1-year-old in an asilo, which is their nursery, and entrusting the community with our child and asking that they teach her the language and culture and food and the way things go. And I was off to learning the language with my tutor on a weekly, I think we were 3 times a week basis. And so that was some of the embedding for us, was just language learning and submitting under that and not asking everyone to speak our language. And we did the same route every day. And I said, buongiorno to everyone. Every day. And some never spoke to me, and many did. And who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here? What are you doing? Why this place? And just, we learned the food. We learned how to cook. We took their advice. Very passionate people around food. And so, okay, we'll do what you say, and then we'll tell you about it, and then we'll invite you in, you can taste it. And so those were some of our embedding practices. Definitely frequenting places, like Mike is saying, is essential I have found, of just really getting to know people, getting them to trust you and recognize you and realize you're not going anywhere anytime soon. And then that then opens up a curiosity to us. Fast forward to Singapore, very different place. The locals, if you weren't going to live there forever, they didn't really want to spend too much time getting to know you further than what the exchange was at that particular time. And so, wow, that took me some time to figure out, okay, well, how do I add value? How do I respect their boundaries and find people who do want to know us, even though we're only here for a short period of time? And the strategy of embedding in the ways that I was used to did have to shift. I began to have to really focus, kind of similar to what we did when our first story was find the leaders, the local leaders who have a vision and are sustainable because they're staying. And so that became the embedding strategy of just befriending people who really wanted to see their own people discipled or evangelized or learning, discovering, etc., and then helping them be the best that they could be, or supporting them, showing up and saying, I'm with you. Whatever you want to do, I'm here. Let's do it. And that became very effective, as opposed to me starting something that hopefully would get to a sustainable place. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Very much.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things I'd like to highlight from what you said, Bethany, you were talking about a value of the practice of embedding that exists without like some goal being achieved. And I think that's really important to note, like us investing in our communities, becoming part of them, bringing out like beautiful things in the world has value on its own, and it doesn't need to end in an initiative. Embedding does something good, and it's an important part of our process. It's also very important on its own.
I agree, James. Well said.
Yeah, yep. Great.
And absolutely. We trust that, right? We trust God's economy. We trust that He's going to be doing something with what we offer Him.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an element to it of, again, I just kind of come back to intentionality. I love buongiorno, like just don't answer, just don't say anything back to me because right now I have no idea. But beyond that, like there's an investment in time that we just have to be really upfront about. Like it takes time to be intentional about a lot of that stuff, because sometimes you just need to get to the class, and it's like, well, no, I need to leave 20 minutes early so I have time to interact with so-and-so.
That's right.
Or whatever.
Margin's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And that's surely a spiritual practice of some sort that we need to really be mindful of, no doubt. And again, whether that's in this hugely cross-cultural kind of a situation or just going food shopping with a little margin in case there's a God moment or something in your hometown, absolutely.
Kind of circling back, I have a funny kind of story regarding the buongiornos. So on my street, Via Campora, there was a man who I greeted every day that I saw him, and never once did he return. So we were advised after we left, because we had such an incredible experience and group of people that we were working with and serving and loving, that we were encouraged to do a Pauline missionary journey and come back in 2 years and just make an intentional retouching of those communities and maybe even offer a spiritual retreat, which we did, etc. So sure enough, we go back to Via Campora, and that man saw us and buongiorno, like, what are you doing back here? Like, he greeted us. He initiated the conversation. Awesome. He couldn't believe that we came back, and he thought we were there to stay, right? We were there to visit, but we were able to finally talk to this man. We were so delighted. It was great. And then also just kind of continuing, I'm really impressed with my in-laws. They decided for the first time in their lives to move into a downtown and have neighbors. They always lived out in the country. And it was an intentional practice of, no, we think we have more to offer in this season of our lives, and we want to help our town transform. And they are chaplains, and they do it through the arts that they're a part of, but they also do it through property management. Manage these properties, and they really care well for their tenants. And I just find that so creative. And you better believe crises happens, and that's who they're calling, for advice, for mentorship, for counsel, for help. And it's just a beautiful streamline into spiritual conversations and faith. I'm also thinking about another woman who lives in an apartment complex here in the States, and her embedding practices is just being at the pool with her dog and meeting people and being very attentive and curious and kind and loving. And she's one of those that just doesn't let conversations or the opportunity for a conversation to pass. Obviously, if someone doesn't want to talk, she's not going to force them to, but most people want to talk, especially to someone who can listen well. And so she's building community around that pool.
If I could grab two themes that I think I'm hearing in these examples. One sounds like a really good practice of presence. It's like, are we doing a good job being in the places that we are? So if it's work, if it's our neighborhood, are we looking for the opportunities that God's providing in those spaces? The other theme I'm hearing is there's some looking for maybe affinity groups is the right term, but frequenting a coffee shop because you love coffee, or a pub, or
the gym in my case.
Yeah, a gym. Right. Yeah. This is probably a great place. I think I've joked with CrossFit people, and I'm like, you guys sometimes are just doing community better than anybody else.
True.
Community. In Right Here, Right Now, which is Alan Hirsch, and I don't remember the second author on that, but they tell a story of a faith community that launched out of a hiking group. This guy just started hiking with a group of people in his city who hiked, and Right Here, Right Now, I think has got so much good stuff to say about embedding. But yeah, they got to know those people in this hiking group well, and some of them wanted a faith community, wanted to engage Jesus in that way. And then they were really creative about what it looked like to start a faith community with that group of people. But yeah, those are just two themes I saw running through those best, like those examples of embedding.
Yeah.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah.
While we're doing examples, what are some examples of like where we've seen a lot of like beauty come out of this process of embedding, whether it be like just our like personal relationships or within Communitas? Where have we seen that like beautiful things come out of this? What are those other bonjour no moments?
Yeah. I mean, not only the reciprocation of relationship, but people are coming to faith. People are being introduced to Jesus. And then they're introducing others to Jesus. And even after we left, we had friends baptize their spouses. I mean, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's the beauty that's coming out of this, that people are experiencing authentic believers doing the best they can to hear from the Lord, discern, be intentional, show up, and then be ready to share and proclaim this shalom and God's love and grace and redemption plan. And people are receiving it.
Yeah. It's great.
What else do you have a specific idea or story, Mike?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of Serve the City, and participated quite a number of times, and I had to see that whole movement, which is connected to Communitas in many ways, obviously, as born out of embedding. Like you need to know what the needs of your community are in order to serve that city, and the personal experiences I've had overseas doing that, and experience just kind of going and helping what's already happening somewhere else for a week or two or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's countless stories of just beauty happening, and that's a persistent sort of global / local movement, which I just think is fantastic. And again, it's all born out of saying, hey, what are the needs of this community, and how do we assemble people? How do we get to know people? How do we find people of good will that want to make the world a better place, and engage them at that level and say, hey, there's things to be done in this city. There's things to be done in this town, things to be done in this block, to help others. And just so much good comes of that. So many beautiful things, so many anecdotes, spiritual conversations that come out of just participating in something like that, or just, you can't count them all, if you're ready to have them. As an American going to Europe and participating in something like that, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, like, why are you doing this? It's just like, okay, how much time do we have? But without getting obnoxious, just saying, hey, like, I just feel like I'm overflowing with love that God has poured into my life, and I just want to share that with everyone I can, and blah blah blah. Tremendously beautiful moments coming out of work that's been being done as we speak with Communitas projects around refugee work. Again, those are kind of my things. So, very substantial churches have resulted from work with refugees, and don't really want to talk about them too publicly in the sense that they can be sensitive, but unbelievably beautiful stories coming out of places, those kinds of experiences. It's amazing how God shows up in those situations. And I've had personally, just a few opportunities to experience some of that and to be with some folks that have been sort of transformed through those experiences. And it's just incredible. Incredible.
What about you, James?
Yeah, a couple things came to mind. I'm going to shout out to all our people in Santa Barbara, because I know them well, a lot of their stories well. But I think of Carrie Euler, who has spent such a long time volunteering with people living on the streets. And I've spent a lot of time with Carrie Euler while she's been spending time with people on the streets, and she's just so good at like making those people feel important, like letting them know that they're important and connecting with them well. Carrie has some cool stories. She's sat with people as they've gone through withdrawals and just been able to like be someone who is present to be like, you can get through this. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that comes to mind is she's gotten, I don't know if she's doing this now, but for a while she was doing art therapy with women who'd been living on the streets. And just like her practice of being in a relationship with those people gave her a lot of insight in how to care for them, and she's gotten to care for people who belong to that community very well. And similarly with like Jeff Schaefer, I've heard lots of pastors talk about like, oh, I just don't know what to do when like somebody who lives on the streets like walks into my church. That's just like churches really struggle with that. And Jeff Schaefer for a period was like doing church in a park with people living on the streets, and he had the insight to do church for that group in a way that worked well for that group, a way that they could experience Jesus and feel belonging. So I think those stories definitely come quickly to mind. Mm-hmm. Question. We've been getting at this a lot in the course of this conversation, but in the practice of embedding, we build a lot of relationships and we develop a lot of perspective. What do we invite our Communitas people to do from that place?
Go for it, Mike.
Thanks. What do we invite? Well, first I would
phrase my question.
Yeah, right. I'm just trying to get my arms around the question. I would say the first thing that we do is respect and honor the relationships and the people that they are between.
Yeah.
And according to the approach that we would offer in Dynamic Adventure, there's this thing called initiating. And really that's a whole nother incredibly context sensitive step, quote unquote. I can't see the air quotes. But so what has this relationship, what has this perspective shown me about how the gospel applies to this situation or and so on, and how can I bring good news to this situation? What is restoration, God's redemption look like in this situation? What does it look like to live as a kingdom person in light of this new relationship or perspective? And again, that response is as varied as the context, right? In the situation. But I guess one thing I would want to say about that is that I'm deeply convicted about not using people as projects. And all of that. So that's why I kind of tried to fumble around for the words to say we respect the relationship, first of all. But where, and that's a process of discerning the next process, discerning the initiating. What is sowing the gospel, in the book, it's, sowing the good news wisely. How do we do that?
Yeah.
And sensitively and appropriately and lovingly and truthfully and all of those things, it's a discerning process, right? The thing that we should do is pray and ask first, right? Like, so now that I know Bill, how do I start to reveal the gospel to him? So on? Where is healing? What does healing mean for that person, or and so on and so forth? And all these questions that are deep and heavy, and we shouldn't take lightly, right? but yes, we're not just making relationships for the sake of relationships. We're making relationships for the sake of God's renewal of the whole world, including Bill and me and you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really well said, Mike.
Thanks. Bethany, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a natural progression that once the relationship's established and there's trust and there's equal curiosity to who we are as people, we live out of that too, of just naturally being in love with Jesus, naturally making choices that reflect that love and that decision in our worship and our practice and our spiritual disciplines and
Mm-hmm.
all of that sort of thing comes out too. And so people, yeah, there's just a progression of as the relationship grows and develops in trust that we will get to share our hearts. And that's, I feel God naturally blends that
Mm.
with people too. We don't have to not be ourselves or we
Right.
have to
Absolutely.
pretend or, we be authentic in that as we discern and listen. Okay, how does that translate for them right now? Yeah.
And Bethany, you're particularly gifted in that, I might add.
Thanks. I'm an evangelist
Mm-hmm.
by a pest, definitely. Yeah. Yep. And I think that what's interesting is the whole team dynamic in this, right? Because for me, it might be much more easy to do this one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening for myself. And so I think what Dynamic Adventure really helps us do is do this in team, do this together, make decisions about how and who and all of that. Maybe speak more on that, Mike.
No, you hit the nail on the head as far as what the dynamic adventure is about. I mean, those are really, they can be very difficult things to discern, and so the learning to practice well together and have good quality, dialogue and even exercising different parts of our personhood, if you will, our mind and our physical senses and so on and so forth, like just to engage all of that in all of us and toward the process of discerning what God's will is yeah, that's what we're about with the dynamic adventure and providing those kinds of tools that are not easy. You don't get a lot of training in that. Let's be honest about that. And they can just be really valuable starting points, at least, to have some of these good conversations that we need to have. And again, the whole ball of wax is ultimately discerning what God has for us. What is He inviting us toward? What is He doing already? What is He inviting us to participate in that He's doing, or is there another thing that He's asking us to initiate? Those are the questions that we're trying to discern answers to and follow the Spirit into the neighborhood together as a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I think those responses really point to how important embedding is, because such an important part of the discerning process. I'm not making a decision for the people around me who I don't know, what they want, what they need.
Right.
Embedding allows me to really know the people around me, and initiating becomes a really well-informed decision because I know the people around me well. And the dynamics are interesting because there's definitely a sense of progression if you look at them, but at the same time, I just might be in the embedding place in relationship with someone ever, or I might return to the embedding place in relationship with someone frequently, where in another relationship, I really might be invited by that person to initiate in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think like it's such an important piece of the conversation is that the individuals I'm building relationships with in the process of embedding have inherent value. And if I've made my entire relationship with them about an agenda, I'm not going to value them the way Jesus is calling me to.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one last question before we wrap up.
Sure.
Do either of you guys have some just like maybe one or two like cool initiating stories that we've seen in Communitas you'd like to share?
Okay, next question. No.
Okay, I do. Yeah. So, I mean, ways in which the communities are, initiating this sort of thing in Italy. We're seeing that through refugee ministries and together going in and serving, together going in and trying to, and here so Italy, sorry, that's what's happening, as well as I'm just thinking about the Farinellis, and they have a community established, but they're not only wanting to attract people to that community. So the community is missional, is going out together to reach people who aren't going to come in the church doors. And so, I mean, that comes to mind. I think about someone stateside who is working within her city, and being a sponsor, being a help to refugee ladies that are pregnant, because she herself is a midwife and has the skills needed to help the mom, help the family. And that's kind of more individual than team, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Let me look at my notes here. I think about even Leon, right? And the gospel impulse that he and his community are doing in these transition homes with the homeless, and offering faith counseling, offering opportunities there where they're very honest about who they are and their motivations. And for me, again, I kind of, because I move around so much, don't have not had the teaming piece, but in my initiation, after relationships have formed, Bible studies happen. People are interested in understanding what Scripture is really meaning to them, and wanting to see Jesus' life more clearly understood and why that matters. And so anyway, so that comes to mind first person of people just are curious. The people I have met are just curious about the Bible and trying to gain a greater understanding of that. Where else? I'm trying to think of the story from someone in Spain. Can you think of it, Mike, at all?
You have to be more specific. I'm not.
Yeah. So I think one of the initiation pieces too for the community is using art in Valencia. So using art and the connection between creation and creator and being creative has just been really effective there, of drawing these artisans, drawing these people in, but then we're reflecting our creator right now. What comes to your mind, James? In your world, how has initiation played out well?
Story that's coming to mind. I just feel like my folks have done embedding really
Yeah.
well. Just seems like such a natural impulse for them both.
Hmm.
Um, but my mom has often done that in the space of her work, and for a while she was teaching parenting classes for teen parents, and my dad was like partnering with her in that, and uh, some of those guys started like coming over to our place and like having game nights and shooting pool and throwing darts and having pizza. Um, and I think in a sense, like that intentionality of like repeating relationship was an initiating practice. Um, you're welcome to like respond to that, Mike. Another thing that happened from that though was one of the guys has really had a long-term relationship with my dad because of that, and has like asked my dad for a lot of wisdom, asked my dad for counseling with the woman who is his baby's mom, and been like, hey, we're like thinking about getting married and we want like counsel and direction. And he's asked my dad to like help him like understand the Bible because my dad's passionate about Jesus. And he's like, okay, help me understand like why this is something you're passionate about. And man, I just think it's such a cool story of embedding. Like as much as that's like, my parents aren't living cross-culturally. They're in the U.S. They're in Bakersfield, which is in California, but it's an awful lot like Oklahoma, where my dad grew up. But even in the city of Bakersfield, my dad had to learn this like young man's language and how to like communicate with this guy. And that has turned into a relationship where he's got to, with a lot of intentionality, like be Jesus to that guy and point that guy to Jesus. So that's a story that I just love.
Hmm.
The Cortezes, I think, have done that very well too, but I'm just not familiar enough with specifics to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important question, right? It's an important thing to not just talk about what it means, but how is it happening? So I really appreciate your questions, James.
Well, guys, we didn't get any audience questions, but I didn't actually invite any audience questions, which I should have. But I think we're probably ready to wrap up. In 2 weeks, we are going to be talking about homelessness in St. Paul with Diane McCartan. That's going to be a really cool conversation that I'm excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Please join us for that. If anybody's watching and has questions later on, we'll be looking at this and we'd love to respond. Man, I feel like we should do each one of these dynamics deserves its own little 45 to 50-minute window.
There you go.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Bye.
Hey, thanks, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely.